This is Ounces to Pounds, written by Aarao Cornelio. If you can't pronounce Aarao Cornelio, Ounces to Pounds. When we were in high school, me and my friends and I, who were from the projects that I frequently hung out in as a stoner attempting to be a local DJ, used to have dreams of being bosses one day when we were older. Me being a DJ and producer of the crew. My friends as supporting backup rappers and co-defendants through it all, and the sky's the limit. We each had our means of getting to the money. They were better than I was at the street style hustling than I was, so I just stuck to selling mixtapes in the hood. As I noted in my previous short stories, The Diary of a Glad Man and Think Like a Cop. But in this part of the Garden series, I will talk about how me and my crew, who thought of ourselves as the next Run DMC or Mobb Deep of our time, carried on recklessly with our lives until we became older adults and were in a position where we could raise our own families or run our own posse like a family and chase dreams of being young millionaires. For the sake of protecting actual people's privacy, I will call my crew the Rush Boys. In high school at Pine Grove, before I moved to my real first big city, I recall watching Rap City and MTV and seeing the impact that Tupac and Biggie had on the rap game. I learned a lot about the West Coast and the streets in general from my friends who lived in a juvenile detention center that was not far from where I grew up. Most of them were from Philly, but some from other locations in the US such as the Midwest, etc. Most of them came from broken homes like the one I used to live in, but none of them from a small town or a town as small as the one I grew up in such a closed-minded environment when it came to the black culture and how we operate as a people altogether can drive a man crazy, being of a color that is not widely accepted and culturally supported by the majority who are Caucasian. I remember when my father passed away, not crying until my mother cried. But when I saw the news report of Tupac dying, I remember tears coming to my eyes as the chills went up my arm hairs. Even at 16, I felt the shift in the young black culture's emotional state as the news of Tupac's death sent shockwaves through the black community all across the nation. I got a lot of game and knowledge about the streets from listening to Pac with my homeboy Earl, who I used to play basketball with at the YMCA as a kid. He was the first one to let me hear the Tupacalypse Now album as a kid after school one day, before I started listening to West Coast hip hop with my homie Earl and Baker Boy, who we referred to as Don King. I listened to mostly the Native Tongues family, which consisted of A Tribe Called Quest, The Beatnuts, Black Sheep, DJ Premier, and Gangstar, etc. Before then, I never heard of rappers like Spice One, MC8, Ice Cube, and Mac 10. Being an East Coast baby from the Beast Coast who grew up in the 80s, I knew nothing about the Rush Coast. I call the West Coast the Rush Coast now that everyone is in such a rush to get there since recreational marijuana usage has been made legal for the entire state of California. Back then, all I knew was if you can make it in New York City, you can make it anywhere. So I never thought of attempting to make it in LA until after Hurricane Irma, when I left Miami for the first time to try out my stakes in California. All I remember is my homeboy Marcus Alexander telling me, high risk, high reward. And it did not click until the last minute when I first decided to come to California, which I re-nicknamed Illmatic-fornia. I grew up listening to a lot of Nas. In fact, all the kids that I went to school with when I moved to Anonymous, Pennsylvania, used to compare me a lot to Nas. It all started with my siblings. They used to call me Baby Nas when my cousin, who used to have a huge trunk of classic records from the 80s, bust into the room and said, "Oh no, Donnie is rapping now." Who does he sound like, they wondered. He sounds like Nas. Oh no, he's gonna be a little heartbreaker. I used to listen to a lot of Biggie as I was turned on to the Brooklyn Bad Boy by my bigger sibling who lived in Brooklyn in the Crown Heights section right next to Utica Avenue at the time, the predominantly Ethiopian side, around the corner from where Biggie and Jay-Z grew up. When Biggie died, the news flash aired in the morning during our assembly in the morning at school in Pine Grove. I remember how my crew looked at each other speechless and saddened by the news. We felt the same shift in the culture that we felt when Pac died. But being from the East Coast, we felt a greater responsibility to the hip hop culture to fill the gap and the missing talent that we lost in those two great young brothers who died in their early 20s, too early before their time. Too young to know what hit them. The Rush Boys consisted of me, my homie Lil, and Lil homie Mouse, who we referred to as Lil Philly. I had another crew who I looked up to that I hung out with called 4PINC, or 4 Players Incorporated, who was older than me and my counterparts. I looked up to them for knowledge on the streets and the game and macking the honeys, but I rolled with the Rush Boys because we were younger and we possessed the energy that hip-hop needed at the time, we felt. I even used to record with them in the juvenile home where they stayed, which I was only allowed to visit on rare occasions because my father used to work there. My father left me and my blood brother with a wealth of knowledge to live on for the rest of our lives, but one of the only physical things I remember being left with was a reporter's handheld recorder from Walmart that my father bought me for like $15 so that I could record my songs with my friends at lunch in the cafeteria and after school. I had another crew that I used to hang out with called the Large Living Crew, who were 2 brothers that were real DJs from around the way with the real equipment, the real Technique turntables, and the real studio that I would go to after school where I laid down my first album called The Rising Sun. The 2 brothers were like the Beastie Boys to me. They had the Adidas and the leather jackets with the cool glasses to match, and they had the NYC flavor, but resided right around the way on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, PA, not far from home. So I never had to run away like I said I always wanted to when I would beg my mother to move to New York City to find a record deal to live with my sibling. I was introduced to them by her. I have to thank her for being there to catch all of my rage and childhood energy and channel how I felt about my father and society at large into a positive facet or outlet, and for letting me rap in their attic and make my first early mixtape, which I later sold to my friends at lunch in Pine Grove. At Anonymous High, when I moved there after my father died, before living in New York City with my older sibling. Okay, before meeting Russell Simmons and his family, before touring the USA, before me being away from home for as long as I've been on this trip to California. Growing up, I was too young to be allowed to watch movies like Scarface, and my attention span was too short to be interested in films like The Godfather, although I heard of them before later watching them when I got to the age when I could understand what was going on. I did, on the other hand, get a chance to watch movies like Boys in the Hood, Menace to Society, and of course all of the Spike Lee joints like Do the Right Thing and Mo Better Blues. My siblings realized early on the importance of showing me the truth of how black males were looked at in society at the time. Although Michael Corleone was an excellent mob figure, he was not black, as Scarface was not as well. There also was a lot of glorification of crime and fast money in that movie, and no true message to the story involving how black men need to be alert and careful of how we represent ourselves in the public eye, as Nas once said, representing as Illmatic, especially in Illmatic, where black on black crime is and has always been at a nationwide high, and the news cameras are always eager to catch us with our pants down. When I was a kid, my father urged me to read as much as possible. He had a book in his library or office as we knew it, entitled Who Built America, that spoke of all the contributing races that worked together to make this country great. When he died, there was a huge gap to fill, and my brother could not fill that gap because he had his children to raise. Neither could my grandpa Mo, though he was an impeccable teacher and a very wise man. As much as I love my grandpa, he is not my dad, but I still loved him and still do miss him very much. When my father died, my madre and my sibling especially knew the importance of me having some type of certificate under my belt to legitimize my struggle, and the importance of me leading a disciplined life. My madre tried her best to keep me in and around the church, but my sibling gave me a book called Who Was Going to Take the Weight, letting me know that we came from a special family. They came from Africa, and me being a first-generation citizen of this country did not make me special by any means, but it did motivate me to want to excel more in academics and want to do all the necessary things that it takes to be on top of your game as a black man in this country, such as acquiring a good education and a good work ethic. Nevertheless, I paid little attention to going to school and more to what was going on in the streets, particularly in the hip-hop industry, and mostly running the streets with my stoner friends, playing basketball, smoking blunts, chasing girls and fast women. I remember when the Chronic album dropped after Doggy Style came out. Snoop was the first big West Coast rapper I listened to. I had the album and was a big fan. Watching him finesse on the screen in a different way than my East Coast OGs, bouncing on hydraulics in their lowriders, screaming, "We don't love them hoes," but getting so much love in return from the ladies regardless. I was even more blown away when I heard the Chronic album for the first time. This was around the time when I tried to smoke marijuana for the first time. It was scary, I cannot lie, to see those actors from Boys in the Hood lives be portrayed in a musical sense that I could hear and understand more technically, especially when Ice Cube dropped his album Death Certificate and Predator. And today was a good day. It wasn't until I moved out to the Watts side of Compton after being homeless in South Central for nearly a month that I realized what Cube meant when he said today was a good day. Being in LA, you can get robbed at any minute. They ain't like the East Coast stick-up kids that would run up on you by themselves with one or two homies with them. On the East, it is said that in the streets, stick-up kids do their dirt all by their lonely. Out in the West, you can get surrounded by 100 thugs wearing rags in a matter of 2.5 seconds. It's that serious. No games are played, and you have to be alert at all times. I lost my wallet 3 or 4 times at least on my first trip to LA. Had plenty of merchandise that I bought with my own money stolen from right under me. Although a terrible experience, I was lucky to not have been robbed at gunpoint. My stoner friend's vision of LA, though, being that I hung around a lot of skateboarders and musicians who want to live there to be able to smoke weed whenever they want in public, was a lot of hype. A lot of smoke and mirrors, a lot of CB4, no gusto. I remember my friends always asking me to take them out to Cali when I would ask them to vote for me when I tried out for The Voice, America's Got Talent, and Wildin' Out. Even something as simple as calling up Hot 97 seemed too difficult for some of them to do, even though they saw videos of me at MS Communications filming videos with Funkmaster Flex and Brooklyn acts such as my homie Energy and Minx from Flatbush and Crown Heights. Even after seeing me being followed by musicians I used to look up to, such as Tech Smokey Love from the 90s and Smith & Wesson, who now follows me on Instagram, they still ask me can I take them to Hollywood because all their mind is thinking of is the same street dreams we used to think of as high school students trying to make it out of these streets. In these streets, there is a lot of weight, but the weight that I speak of now is emotional weight. Responsibility, to put it frankly. People are more creative, and with social media becoming a popular tool to doing business for freelancers like myself who sell merchandise such as clothing at their hip-hop shows and on the internet. Fewer people are willing to take the same trips young guys who wanted to be like Escobar took trying to be street bosses. Fewer guys that wanted to be Scarface and more guys wanting to be like were wanting to be like Nas or Jay-Z. Entrepreneurs. 2019 marks the year of the young black entrepreneur everywhere. But whether you choose to be legitimate in your approach or not, you need a plan B to back up your plan A. Does not work like my grandpa Mo would always say, and my madre as well. You need a plan B to back up your plan A just in case your plan A doesn't work. Okay, so I chose to finally begin thinking about taking school seriously, getting a trade, and being a truck driver and part-time boxer while going to school to be a barber and a couple of other things just in case none of those work. Until summer when I can begin practicing driving truck when it is not so dangerous as it is in the winter snow. It was time to inhale this American oxygen that Rihanna sung about and strengthen my lungs and prepare to build some real American muscle. The kind of muscle that built the buildings and houses and beautiful mansions we see in the USA today. From the bridges to the immaculate buildings, this country was crafted and made from a grand design. Some architects made the blueprint for how this country was to be built and molded. These men's names are written on the Constitution of the United States of America and the Bill of Rights. They are our first presidents and the men that worked for them as their first congressmen and governors and senators. It was built off of slavery and the money that it produced. It was built by the Chinamen. It was built by the Mexicans and all of the races that were here before the first Caucasians stepped foot on the soil. My father taught me about Christopher Columbus as a kid and how he was truly not the first discoverer of America. He taught me and my brother and our siblings about the Willie Lynch papers. He taught us also that even though much of our initial groundwork that was done for this country to be as great as it is today came from the hard work of black slaves, he also taught us that there was a lot of work left to be done, as did my madre and my grandpa Mo. Work in the labor force as truck drivers, carpenters, painters, architects, even policemen, as I stated in my last short story, Think Like a Cop. But who is going to take the weight? From ounces to pounds, today's hustlers do a little more than dabble in weight. Young black males at the age of 16 are becoming major figures in the streets, wasting their lives, chasing fast money, women, and cars, when they may be missing out on their child's life, as I did, or even a career as a successful worker in the workforce, beginning with a simple 9-to-5 job and establishing a solid work history by working a steady job over a long period of time. As I think of my future as a truck driver, lifting heavy weights and moving products from one store to another as I drive from town to town and state to state making deliveries, I thought about my dad and how he was gone a lot as a child. My dad knew the highways of the U.S. like the back of his hand. He was a military man and a salesman, and that so naturally he had a good sense of direction when it came to driving. But he also took medication later in his life after suffering from a breakdown when his father passed away in 1994. He slept a lot and rarely went to work towards the end of his life, and my madre always thought I would end up like him if I continued to sleep and miss school, in the sense that I would miss out on all the opportunities that this life had to offer, like being a good father, being a respectable figure in my community, having a strong family life, having a strong relationship with God. Being a truck driver, you have to be strong, you have to be sober, and you have to be alert at all times. My non-biological daughter's goddad drove a truck all around the country My dad's good buddy, Mr. McCandless, drove a truck for a living before losing his hand in an accident, and plenty of my friends who chose not to do anything conventional like the army or college were beginning to cut their odds and go to trade school for their CDL to hopefully become a truck driver also. I even met a woman from Vegas on the way back to PA who was going to school to be a trucker. You have to be able to pull yourself out of bed every day, sleep in your truck, stay up, and stay focused on the road for hours at a time, but mostly lift heavy objects when it comes to make your drop-offs at your delivery, I have been told. But you never have to worry about the cops following you to sniff what is inside your trunk, or your goons rushing your house like Scarface because you have sugar bowls in every cupboard of your house. It is legitimate money. You get to see the country, get a great workout lifting the merchandise. You stay in shape and you learn a new skill set while earning a great paycheck. And they are always in need of good drivers that can stay awake on the road and perform at high levels of alertness at all times. This stuck in my mind heavily as I weighed out my odds for either joining the Air Force as a mechanic or becoming a pilot. Today in America, some commercial pilots make a fantastic living, but I never had the balls to aspire to join the ranks of America's top pilots because it not only takes nerves of steel, it takes an extreme amount of reserve. The kind of reserve that I do not at this present moment have. But I did think about being a private pilot, and if I did not make it as a truck driver or in the Air Force as a mechanic. Someone who flew rappers or celebrities to their private homes after their tours or vacation, but this also takes many hours of practice and years of flying in the air, let alone driving on the road. As a baby in the 80s, I was fed American milk. Everything from knowledge to culture, I was like a sponge that was left in the sink to soak up this American culture so I could be the best I could be. I was not a Top Gun or a badass like some of my friends who come from military families also that chose to join when they were young. I was a premier slacker who lacked a lot of practice and discipline, but after attempting to try to climb life's walls of intelligence in one way and not succeeding, I nevertheless have been able, with the prayers of my family, to dust myself off and try again. I have to say RIP to Aaliyah, who was my inspiration in that last line, and a powerful voice in the culture as we know it. When we were kids on Christmas, our godparents, used to bring us a box full of presents for each of us kids with church books, popcorn balls, and different things for our Christmas tree. But we each received an envelope with $100 in it. We waited all year round for our grandparents to show up on our doorstep with that box. Our godparents, pardon me. Because we were poor kids of simple means, and me and my siblings always knew when we were getting that envelope with our own $100 bill in it for Christmas. I could only imagine what it would have been like if we had to wait for that money and those presents to come in the mail. We probably would have gone crazy just waiting. The job of a mailman can also be a stressful career to take on. I imagine upsetting a kid who was waiting all year for a Christmas present like that because you misplaced their package or made the wrong delivery to the wrong address. It's enough to make a brother stone crazy. Being a boxer was not fun. Training for the first time, still addicted to cigarettes and overweight for my class weight. I remember what it was like sparring for my first time with my homie Lou at a boxing gym in Youngstown. I remember how emotionally drained I felt after I stepped out of the ring sparring with a 250-some odd pound boxer who was at least 6'2" and could do one finger push-ups better than I could do with two hands. I learned a valuable lesson that is life in life that is about weight. No, I learned a valuable lesson that is, life is about weight. You have to be able to pick yourself up when you fall, and no one is there to pick you up but God and your guardian angels. You have to be able to knock out your opponent when he is throwing punches that feel like bulldozers to you. You have to adjust. You have to learn to adjust the emotional weight that comes with doing time, especially for something as simple as a threat. You have to be able to shrug off the weight of negative energy from negative people and people who are not in your corner by any means. People that are preying on your downfall. People who would rather drop a barbell on your neck than spot you in the gym. Things like that. Technically, life revolves around physics, or as Nas would put it, sciences. Mostly metaphysics and the life force that we possess in our body of energy. Words move. Money moves, trends change and cause the world to move. People move, and rarely does anyone stay in the same place all their life unless they are stuck, content, or doing something wrong. To move in today's society, you must know what's hip, what's good, what's going on, and be ahead of the times, almost as if you were a journalist. You have to know the scoop like a ball fan. You have to know the stats, and you have to be willing to take the weight when your crew cannot. As I strived hard not to roll with the rush, but to beat the rush, I found myself working each day, challenging myself to shake bad habits I picked up, like smoking cigarettes and being high day in and day out. As much as I enjoyed the sensation I got when catching a buzz with my local homeboys, it made me lazy. And I need my energy to get up every day to work, as I found when I was delivering pizza. When I smoked weed, I didn't have that fresh boost of energy I had when I was sober. I was not able to accomplish as much, and I slept a lot. Plus, I studied a lot about the effects of weed that has on the brain's neurotransmitters, and the long-term effects aren't too pretty. Everything from forgetfulness to reckless driving did not pose as something which I want to include in my life as I look forward to what I desire my life to be like in 2019. I heard Jay-Z say in a rhyme once that he was strong enough to carry Biggie Smalls on his back and all of BK before dropping his famous line, "Holla back." Biggie was a big dude, and Brooklyn is a strong borough, mostly noted as the toughest area to grow up in New York. Michael Jordan was from Brooklyn, Aaliyah was from Brooklyn, arguably the toughest borough in NY, where kids die every day to street violence, but it did not stop them from flying, and when failing in one area or another, in dusting themselves off and trying again. Not too many people knew this, but Michael Jordan, like I, was cut from his high school basketball team when his coach did not see the kind of potential in him that he desired to see. Nevertheless, Jordan did not cease going to basketball court every day after school to practice ball handling until he surprised his coach the next year when he flew over his opponent's head, dunking from the foul line in the face of his challengers. Being cut from the basketball team in high school bears a lot of pressure as a kid with hoop dreams in a city where you're either slinging a crack rock or you got a wicked jump shot, as Biggie said. But Jordan practiced every day and finally overcame the pressures to make the cut the next year and was picked up by his senior year by the North Carolina Tar Heels because of his impeccable game on the basketball court. New York City is largely a city known for breeding basketball legends, from Rucker Park legends such as Pee Wee or Earl Manigault to many others. To be turned down your junior year in high school because the coach did not believe in you must have weighed down heavily on the mind of Michael Jordan as he assessed what he was going to do with his life if he was not accepted as a basketball player in college and later in the NBA. He must have dreamed of it every night as a kid. I know I did. When I was rejected by my coach at the baseline When I was trying to make a layup, it crushed me. I was nearly laughed out of the gym, and my foul shots were terrible because my grip on the ball was not as smooth as others. Although I couldn't palm the ball the way I wanted to after my accident in third grade, I became ambidextrous after that accident, so I was an awkward ball handler who only had one move, which was a spin move that I invented after watching my favorite player, Allen Iverson, play. It was kind of like the killer crossover, but not perfected. Anyhow, being a sloppy player on the court in the city where players have such finesse and ball handling capabilities was a huge letdown. But Jordan was able to take the weight and shift it to the motivation to practice every day rather than letting it get him down. The result, an all-star team in the Bulls and 5 championship rings. Once again, emotional intelligence and being able to dish it out when being critiqued as a player who didn't have the potential to play to the level he needed to play its role. 1 year later, he was a franchise player being scouted by the best teams in the league. Mike Tyson was also from Brooklyn. Unfortunately, Tyson's career was cut short because of, according to my knowledge, not as good at controlling his temper and emotions after allegations of him raping Robin Gibbons hit the news networks. It shattered his career. He went from being a knockout king to a regular inmate at, I believe it was Rikers Island, where he was locked up during his bid. Before serving time, Mike Tyson was deadly in the ring. His speed was impeccable. His agility was that of a natural. His power was that of a beast. People were scared to step in the ring for fear they would not last a second in the circle of death with him and be able to avoid his deadly blows. Tyson ran every day, trained every day, hit the bag every day. His life consisted of nothing but boxing in Brooklyn. He was known as an animal but feared as a god. They called him the Dynamite Kid. He was a heavyweight champion until he met up in the ring with Evander Holyfield. To be a heavyweight champion, you have to be a brick wall, solid as fuck. His fists were like bricks, and nobody wanted to be hit with them or dance with him in the ring, and neither would I. But in the game of life, power is nothing in the place of perception. Reading your opponent's move is everything, and you can't read your enemy's moves when you're an emotional wreck. And that is what I was in the ring. And that is what he was in the ring with Holyfield. Holyfield kept him on his toes, which not many boxers were able to do up to that point in his career. In many a boxer's career, there have been commentators who say pound for pound he was one of the best in his time. I also heard commentators use the terminology, how does one boxer weigh up against their challenger pound for pound? The weight term is used heavily in boxing as you are put in your boxing class by weight. Every fight you have to make weight to make sure you are still eligible to fight your opponent you are scheduled to fight that month or whatnot. You can't be an ounce over or a pound under. You have to be in peak condition to make the cut even before stepping in the ring. So what is from ounces to pounds really about? How ounces to pounds refers to my audience is a simple message. Know when you are in over your head and know when you are in too deep, and your arms are way too short to box with God, and stop fighting him. God gives us tools to use in life. He gives us a body that we are called to keep clean and holy and be blameless before the Lord, although that really rarely happens. He said that they did to me, they will do to you also, especially when fighting for God's people or doing something that's good. He will fight for our fights and with us against our opponents the same way that he fought for David when he had to go up against a giant by the name of Goliath. Find your Goliath, not in fear, but in fearlessness, knowing that God already won the battle that you are up against. Know that you are more than victorious in Christ Jesus who strengthens us. Know that he will wipe away every tear from your eye. Know that we will fall, but we will also rise and get back up again. So dust your shoulders off, breathe and do a holy dance because Jesus is the reason for the season. And we were not given a timid spirit, but a spirit that will shut up the mouth of lions. Ounces to pounds. Move that weight.